what is the relevance of data protection in a cyber world that we live in? Now, a lot of what companies do already still stands true in terms of the way they need to protect their data, but we need to think much more clearly about the modern threats that businesses face. So many organizations today don't even have the ability to start a backup process and work on their data protection scenario because all of their data gets locked out in the scenario of a cyber attack. I mean, actually, what happens in a cyber attack that we see is that once that malware or ransomware goes live within the organization, it pretty much attacks everything that's on the network. And this is what's different about modern day cyber attacks as opposed to traditional data protection. Because once that infection, if you like, spreads across the network, you can't even start a backup recovery process if your backup servers are on that network. And therefore you really are stuck. And we spoke to a company probably 2 years ago now, and they had to pay 15,000 Bitcoins to their attacker just to get one backup server released so they could start a backup process. So guys, this is real, okay? We can't stick our heads in the sand and think this is not going to happen to us. The good news is there's things that we can do about it, and that's what I want to touch on as we go through this conversation. I just want to bring to the fore, like, what's different now than what was before, because actually the things that we care about in terms of protecting our business in a traditional disaster recovery event still stand true. And in fact, today, most of the disaster recovery events that happen are still related in some way to more of these traditional areas. And fire, for example, is one of the main ones, whether it's a direct consequence of the fire or the water damage that happens, or the smoke damage that happens as a result of that fire. And in fact, so customers still today need to think about how they're going to protect their business in these areas. And it still baffles me that even today I go and see some major institutions and they still don't have a robust plan for protecting their business, even in these traditional scenarios. And what I mean by a robust plan is something that works and something that they test and something that they can rely upon. And we often help clients through that process. If you look at the elements of what a cyber recovery issue looks like, you can see that they are different. It's unrealistic to expect to recover from a full cyber attack in the same way as you would recovering from a snapshot as you might have in a traditional data recovery position. However, if you look down the other areas here, you don't have to put a solution in place that addresses all of your business data. You'll see over here we talk about comprehensive all data volumes for a traditional disaster recovery. When we talk about cyber recovery, we're talking about what are the most critical business assets that the client or the business has, and often it's somewhere between 10 and to 15% of the total amount of data that company has. So we're not looking at putting something in place that addresses 100% of the data. We're talking about something very specific, and often this engagement relies upon conversations with business owners, application owners. Say, look, if you are out of business or your systems were down, what are the things you've got to get back quickly to enable your business to carry on running? And that's the 10 to 15%. So it's the online ERP systems. If you're a manufacturer, it's the online manufacturing systems. If you're a retailer, it's the online retail commerce systems. One size does not fit all, and that's the beauty of this engagement and the solution that we work through with clients. It doesn't have to be everything, and therefore it makes it more cost effective. At CSI, how do we talk to our clients about this, and how do we start the conversation? And the model that I've got behind you isn't rocket science. It's not new, but it's something that we use across all of our engagements with our clients, and it is tried and tested. And it makes no difference whether it's a traditional data protection or whether it's a discussion around a cyber recovery solution. So really, it's about understanding the attributes of the data. And we talk here about creating policy from those attributes. And what I mean by that is, how much data does the client have? As I said just now, how much of that data is really critical to the business if it wasn't available? How fast is the data growing? And what type of data is it? Is it systems of record, which we call, block data that sits in databases and, ERP systems? Or is it file or object data, which is a bit more transient and a bit more difficult to file and to categorize? And then, as with every business, we can spend as much money as a client has got to create a new solution to defend against the attacks we're talking about. But often you have to balance the cost of implementing that solution with the risk, and that is a trade-off that we help clients through as we have that conversation. And really, the first part of this engagement is what we call discover and justify, and is what is going on today. If you were to look at, open up the lid on the box of what the business looks like today, how are they protected in both the traditional sense and for cyber recovery? And that gives us a level, just a line in the sand view of if something happened today, what are the issues for the business? We document that through that process, and often that starts as the business case that the people we're working with take to the board eventually for some sort of investment to make change. Once we've done the discovery, as you'd expect, we will then start thinking about solutions, and that's where we define and design. And this can be a number of different solutions from different technology vendors. Of course, you'd expect us to be able to deliver the solution, and this is about our professional services and our project management. And as a business, we have a very large managed service business for data protection. So if a client wants to hand off responsibility of the new environment to the expert, which we consider ourselves to be, then our Helix managed services are available to our clients so that we can carry on looking after their data and protecting it and making sure that they don't fall back into the same trap that they did do originally. One of the tools that we use to help clients understand what's going on today, and we use tools that collect data from their current systems, and pretty much any existing data protection software asset they have today, we can extract data from it, metadata from it, and create some useful insight from that. But actually, also, it's about sitting down with some of the business owners, the line of business, some of the application owners, and talking about how they view the as-is position. So what's happening today? And what's interesting there is when you ask those specific questions and you document the as-is, and then you actually look as to what actually is happening today. So what's the perception and what's the reality? They can be very different. And this is just an example of some questions that we ask. And clearly where there's the biggest difference and the biggest gap between those two lines is where there's the biggest issue in terms of perception and reality. And that may be the areas that we hone in on to start looking at some ways in which we can address those particular pain points. So it's not all about technology, it's not all about collecting data from their systems, it's about human interaction and talking to our experts and our consultants that understand this business. Dell Technologies has a great solution, a set of solutions actually around data protection, and in particular their cyber recovery solution is market leading. And this is just an idea from a component point of view as to what does that look like. So if I just walk you through this, and on the next chart I'll take you through some of the more detail. But really it's about understanding how we're going to protect their production environment. And you'll notice that backup is already on there as a line item. And this is because when we create a cyber recovery vault for a client, it's taking, as I said, the 10 to 15% of most valuable data out of that backup and putting it in a very secure vault. So it's a part of the infrastructure that's behind the traditional backup. Of course, there's all the other data sources that we care about, and you'll see that the ability to pretty much recover from any major data source is available here. So it's not a proprietary, limited solution that you can only apply to a small part of your business. The crucial part of this overall design is what we call an air gap. An air gap is simply that once the data has transferred from in this case, the backup system to the vault, that the line is cut. So that the network that's transferring that data severs, not literally, but virtually severs, and therefore no data can transfer in or out of that vault. In a way, it's a bit like the old days when clients used tape systems for an offline version. And in fact, just on that point, tape does have a relevancy today, but really only in very large data sets where the speed of recovery is not a major issue. But mostly something like an online data vault, cyber recovery vault, which is disk based, is much better to recover from cyber attacks quickly. So once the air gap is opened and the data is transferred, and again, just to reiterate, it's not all the data, it's the 10 or 15% that matters to the business. Then it goes into this cyber recovery vault, and here it's protected. Okay, so you'll see that no one can access that data vault without privileges. The IP addresses that transfer from here don't follow through to here, so there is no direct line into this vault once the data's in there. And really, this vault also has the ability, and the software wrap that Dell Technologies bring to this vault helps us understand and start screening the software that's in the vault to make sure that data in there isn't already breached, isn't already corrupted. Okay, because if you've got data in there that's already happened, and this is where we talk about zero-day attacks, where perhaps the attack has been in the system for some time, but it's just not known to the business. And in fact, so there might be corrupted copies within the organisation that the organisation's not yet aware of. So there's really sophisticated software, AI, cognitive software that helps scan that vault and the data within the vault to make sure that it's good, it's a good copy. And then if we needed to recover from it, it's going to enable the business to commence. And as it says here, there are a very limited amount of people that can access that vault, and that's deliberate, clearly, so that it's not open to everyone to get in there and make changes. The other thing is it is impossible to make changes to the data that resides in that system. So the copy of the data that sits in there is untouched in that respect. So Dell have introduced this concept of a landing zone and then a clean room, and this is really vital to this whole process, because what's the point of having data that's clean and free from corruption in your vault if you can't then use it to recover your business? And so what this does is it once it's worked out what the good copy is, it moves that data into a landing space. A landing space, an area whereby in the event of an attack and a known point at which the attacks happened, you can start bringing that data back into what they call a clean room, which has been sanitized, and then make it available back to the users to start carry on running the business. Again, through an air gap process, so that you can't get people coming in through this route and corrupting the data. What's the process you go through to implement something like this? It is about the planning. We've talked about the planning already, and that's where CSI can really help our clients work on what do we need to protect and how do we do it. We move into the cyber recovery vault, which is the isolation part, and then we lock it down. As I said, no one can touch it, no one can gain access to it. We know it's a good copy. Then we do the analytics on it to make sure that nothing else is happening in that environment whilst it's in there. That's constant. And then we move it into the landing zone. And only when we get to the point where we need to recover from an attack do we put it into the clean room and then start our business again. And as you can see, resume business as usual. There are different types of ransomware. There's the destructive ransomware, and the point here is that pretty much the known attacks that are out there in the world are protected through this solution. And also, let's not forget, it's not always about the external intruders in a business. You do get malicious attacks from within inside a business. That's quite common as well. So even though you've got people behind your firewall who work in your business, you still need to make sure that they don't have access to the most critical copy of the data and don't have access to that vault. We're also finding in some industries, especially financial services and central government agencies, that it's becoming even built into regulation that companies need to have demonstrable ways of where they can show they're protecting their data, both from traditional attacks and traditional reasons why you'd be breached, but also cyber recovery. So no longer can clients think about dodging the question or sticking their head in the sand. It really is now about embracing the fact that they are going to be regulated on it, and how do they get on with it and do it. And as I said, the good news now is that the technology is available for this now to happen. And on that point, it is about the technology, but it's also about the processes and the people. And if you do one of those in isolation, it's not going to work. And it's about the planning. And this is what I'm talking about. So once you've got this solution in place, it's about everybody who needs to know about how to put that into action knows the playbook, if you like, of what needs to happen in the event. It's a bit like someone hitting the red button and something's happened, and we all spring into action. everyone knows their role, everyone knows what process to follow, so that the business can get back online as quickly as possible, and therefore have limit the damage to the business. All of you listening to this will know that you're already embarking on a cloud strategy. Some companies have gone full into cloud first, which means that the answer's cloud. What's the question? And I question that sometimes, but that's for another day. And there are some that have a very considered cloud strategy, and that cloud strategy is often a hybrid multi-cloud. What does that mean? That means that there's data that you're going to keep on your premises behind your own firewalls. There's data you may have in a public hosted service, and there's data that you might put inside the hyperscalers like Azure and AWS and Google and what have you, and IBM. So really it's about how do we make sure that in the world of data protection, in both traditional sense and also cyber, that we cater for data that sits wherever it resides. And I talk to clients and I say, look, just because you moved your applications or you've got software as a service applications delivered to you and they're outside of your direct management control, it doesn't mean to say you should treat the importance of securing that data and protecting that data any less. So in a way, when we build what we call a backup catalog for a customer, which lists all of their data sets and looks about what they should have for their recovery time objectives and their recovery point objectives and their retention periods, I want them to think about their cloud applications and their cloud data as well. And those that don't include that are at risk, because if you look at the small print for a lot of those cloud providers, they say data is the client's own responsibility, it's not theirs. So it's really important that we look at the holistic piece of all the client's data. So again, when we talk about the Dell Technologies portfolio, the great thing about their data protection suite and the data domains and the IDPAs that they have in their portfolio is that they are now designed to live in a multi-hybrid world. So yes, you can still have your on-premise appliance and you can still replicate it to another one in another data center that you might have, or one that you use and someone else hosts, and that's still fine. And by the way, that's still a big chunk of the overall user market that we see today. And the technology we have here still, the reason why it's got such large market share is really down to the way that the technology works and the data reduction technology that it has. 55-to-1 compression dedupe ratios is just phenomenal, and that just means you're transferring less data when you're putting it out in these clouds. And that's important because when you move data in and out of the cloud, it costs you money. So you want to make sure you're moving as little data as possible. So in this scenario, we're talking about, well, what are the use cases for moving data into the cloud and how do we protect it? And the good news is you can see from the clouds that are floating above at the top there that pretty much all of the main cloud providers are catered for. So whatever the client's choice of cloud is, or choice is, because often we see customers using more than one cloud, it's catered for. So that's good. But also you've got different use cases. You might want to put data in the cloud for long-term retention or archive, which means you're going to want to get hold of it at one point in the future, but it's not really a backup for immediate recovery. And that might be driven by regulation. You've got to keep data for 15 years or 20 years or forever. And doesn't it make sense to store it somewhere where it's relatively cheap? Disaster recovery is now a big opportunity for customers, especially in the world of cloud. So not only are you putting backup data in the cloud, but also you've got the policies around it to recover that data and carry on operating as a business in the event of a disaster. So that means you've got users, you've got applications, and you've got the data together to be able to start recovering from that disaster. In cloud protection, that just means Dell can deploy some of their technologies as software, and you put that software inside the cloud of your choice, and it can perform data protection within that cloud. And it's what we call software defined, and that's available today as well. And then what we work with clients on frequently now, which is they want a copy of their data in the cloud. No longer do they want that data to reside in a second data center, which is costing them money. They want to get rid of that. They want to keep data on premise maybe for 14 or 30 days on site, so that if it's a restore that they need to perform, they can do that quickly because it's on premise and it's on disk and it's quick. And anything after that point, that's not been touched. It just goes out and tears out to the cloud, and that's perfectly viable. And we actually architect a lot of those solutions with our clients today. So really it is, as it says here, it's a wide protected ecosystem. And also just the point here, which is, a lot of the market has moved to virtual environments whereby we use VMware, we use Hyper-V and other alternatives, but there are still a number of physical systems of record out there, especially in larger enterprises that need to be catered for. And it's important that you have one solution that fits all, and that you don't have to buy point solutions because you've got physical and you've got virtual environments. So what next? What is it? What should I do if I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm honest with myself, in the business that I operate, I don't think we properly know how we're protecting our data today, even in the traditional sense. I can't remember the last time I ran a DR test. I don't really have faith that we can recover all of our data when we need to, or certainly our mission critical data when we need to. And this 7 to 10 year refresh cycle that I often see around data protection needs to change. Okay, it's as important to focus on your data protection as it is all of your production systems. So what next? The good news is that it's something you can address. It's something you don't have to throw lots of money at and do it really quickly. You can do it in a considered way, and that's where we work with customers through that process that I talked about in terms of discover and define to start with, and then move through projects that are justified and sometimes cost justified through that process based upon the business outcome that you're looking to gain. But first step, literally determine what your critical data is. And as I said, one size does not fit all. Let's sit down and say, what would be an issue to you as a business if you couldn't recover that data within minutes or hours? What would put you out of business? And which systems could you probably get away with not getting back online maybe for a week or 2 weeks? It's not going to cripple the business too much. That's the first piece. Second thing is, let's look at how we then access your data volumes, and what do we do, and what is that design of a solution that we need to put in place to meet those requirements. And that can be multifaceted, but I've talked today about what Dell Technologies can offer. They are market leaders in this space, but we can work with you, the customer, to make sure we put the right solution in place. And linked to that, it's what is that recovery timeline. So as I said to you before, it's working with the business, looking at the line of business applications, and then deciding what that criticality is. And as I said, one size does not fit all. And then finally, as to bring it together, to bring cyber and cloud together, it's aligning it with your cloud strategy. As I said before, make sure you know what data you've got as a business, not just what you've got on premise, what you've got in the cloud, whether it's a SaaS or a PaaS or an IaaS implementation. Include that in your planning, and we can help you with that. And then really you're ready to go. So that's all I wanted to cover for now. Just one thing to say, that the value of the CSI as a business now is we've got a very mature security practice within the business. And what I like to coin the phrase sort of first line of defense and last line of defense. So the first line of defense is the security offerings that we have within CSI, whether that's building a SIEM, or whether it's protecting from phishing attacks, or whether it's protecting your endpoint devices. We've got that. But as I said, it's not a question of if you're going to get breached, it's a question of when. So that's where the last line of defense is really important, and that's where our data protection offerings, in the modern world and also in the traditional sense, are absolutely vital to the offerings that we have with our clients. So I want to thank you for listening, and that concludes my discussion with you.